find no information. And my husband did a lot of the primary research, but once I was able to research without it, really messing with my head, I was trying to find if I any information on Fort Leonard Wood, this area, and they would mention a couple of things. I think Lampe, Missouri, down at the very south part of Missouri, they mentioned Lampe, Missouri. I could find that, but no mention of Fort Leonard Wood. And when I was praying, I felt like God showed me that we're the connector point between all of the occult activity on the East Coast and all the activity on the West Coast. And I think that it's been very much hidden in this area that there was any occult activity. When people mention the Ozarks, you just think of old country living, just backwoods. But I think that there's such a high level of incest and all of these horrible things that always accompany occult activity. Very high level drugs, meth labs. And so I think that this area was primarily their focus of cloaking it. Because I think if this area was ever exposed and the breaking of the occult power happened, that it was going to start the unraveling of this mind control across the entire nation. And the reason I did find something recently, I haven't been able to vet it. I don't know where they got the information, but I did read where someone had found out that Fort Leonard Wood was a part of Operation Paperclip, where they brought the Nazi scientists over. And, most people think, well, they helped us in the space program with NASA and things like that, but they also were a very big part of the mind control experiments. And so what I read was that Fort Leonard Wood was chosen as one of the sites for Operation Paperclip to continue, and that it was there was training involved there for remote viewing.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that.
And target acquisition.
Yeah. I'm actually a trained remote viewer, and I've had to do a lot of deliverance around that, I'll tell you. But, so I was going to ask, do they do remote viewing there?
Well, that was part of my memories that came up, was being trained to remote view and target acquisition. And I would hear that in my mind. I would see a laser point. Then there would be a white laser drawn to the north and south and to the east and west. It had something to do with latitude and longitude. And I would hear in my mind, target acquired. And so when I started telling my husband these things, he would do research and he would try to find things. And we found things similar to that, like military training. We just couldn't connect it to Fort Leonard Wood. And I think that it's so secretive that I think this may be one of the last places that it's being exposed.
Well, they say that the U.S. has dropped its remote training program. And I don't believe that for a minute. I just think it's gone deeply underground.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they would drop that because it would be too important in warfare.
Absolutely. I mean, it's critical, and I think it's just gotten more sophisticated.
I agree. And I think the technology from when I was a child has so increased that I think that's why it will be so much more difficult with the younger generations.
I had the suspicion when I was very interested in learning to remote view, because I've been working as a clairvoyant and just wanted and really was interested in helping people find their missing kids. And I was pretty good at it, but I thought remote viewing, because it was advertised, the training was advertised as being more sophisticated and that you could stay on target longer. And so I did the training, but when I got there, I just felt like I shouldn't be here. This is bad. There's something really bad here. And I noticed that they were paying a lot of attention to me. And I was pretty good at it. And I just had this awful feeling that there was more to this than they wanted to train us to be, that corporations could use us to screen employees and that sort of thing. And, for me, it was about wanting to help people find their loved ones. And they actually, I was a Canadian in an American program at the time, and they had all of the Americans sign a document that they would not spy on the U.S. And they weren't quite sure what to do about me, but they asked me to sign it, and I said absolutely not. And so anyway, that's one of my little remote viewing stories.
Well, I'm sure you were picking up on the demonic activity with that.
Yeah. Here, I'll tell you this. I know this is your time, but I'll tell you this. Toward the end, when I was walking away from it and everything I had been involved in, I was remote viewing, and normally with remote viewing you can see what's going on, but you don't have to. So you can see a crime perpetration, but you don't have to experience the emotion of it, and as you do with clairvoyance. And I was aware that there was a dark presence watching me in that scene, watching to see and wanting to feed on any pain I might feel from what I was witnessing. And that was the last time.
Oh, I can imagine that, because the pain and the fear, those are what feed those demonic entities.
Oh, absolutely. And I knew that when I was working as a clairvoyant, because you suffer, and the sounds, I mean, you can kind of, hold the images and talk yourself out of really paying attention to them. But the sounds of somebody being harmed in ways that I'm sure you're aware of, those things don't leave.
No, and to me, the worst was the sounds, rather than the pictures. I don't know if I was just trained to handle the pictures differently, because I've always been a visual person, but the sounds were the most traumatic to me.
Yeah, that really reinforces thank you for telling me that. That enforces my experience, and the demonic feeds on how you respond to the sounds, yes, and almost wants you to hear them. They're kind of getting a twofer,
Well, I think that's how all of the high-level demonic activity is built, is through those horrible emotions that they can cause, especially if they can cause it. It builds their power.
Absolutely, they feed. Well, that's part of Egyptian, the dark magic of Egypt. They would torture people to suck, basically, on the energy of the pain of the torture to feed them,
yes,
and build up their power.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man, what a dark, dark world.
Isn't it awful? Sometimes you just look at it and you just think, how have we even survived? Only by the grace of God.
I know. That's it. That's the only explanation for it, I think.
I do too.
One of the things that touched me, I want to go into the whole mind control a bit more deeply with Project Monarch and all of that, but there's something that I want to ask you about. One of the things in your book that really touched me was your daughter's perspective. She wrote a little bit about what it was like for her. And the thing that really broke her heart was the fact that she was so isolated by the church, and that the family was as well, that people wouldn't hear you, wouldn't offer support. And I think that's so alive in the church today. They don't want to hear about it. They just don't want to know. And I really think they're dishonoring God. First of all, because they're not loving another Christian, and second of all, they're refusing to accept their authority that we're given as a Christian, which is to stand down these demonic forces.
I totally agree. I believe that the whole existence of things like Project Monarch and those things are because people have not wanted to look. And I understood in our particular situation, because I think everyone in that town where we were was being affected. And I think the fear was knocking on doors in the back of their minds that they had not come to grips with. And so the way that they handled it was with a spiritual overtone, the ones that I did talk to, I just think you need to look at the light. Now, that was what would be the response out of most of the people. And I couldn't keep from getting angry, because look at the light was one of the trigger words used in that area to make you focus on the light of Freemasonry. Right. So it sounds spiritual, doesn't it? It sounds like, well, that's a right thing to do. But when people, and I've heard many pastors say this through years, is that we just need to focus on the power of God. We don't need to look at any of these dark things. Well, that's how the dark things continue. If nobody looks, if nobody takes authority and says, I bind this, I forbid it to continue in Jesus' name, that means little children all over are going through torture, and we sit by and we do nothing. That was the thing that overrode any fear that would rise up in me as this huge conglomeration of occult activity reaching to all levels of our government. That's why it didn't grip me. That fear is on what would override it was the thought that I will not turn my head and watch these little children suffer, and whatever I've got to do to stop it. Because when the people were coming in to talk to me, Patricia, I understood what some of them were saying, that if we don't do what we're told, these, our children are being threatened. And so what I told them to do is I said, you fight me. You do whatever you need to do to keep your kids safe until you see that you've got a clear road out of this. You do whatever you've got. And I'm going to pray that God protect me, and I'm going to pray that God protect you. Because the reason those people in that area could not have any faith in God is that every person they said they killed, that they were going to kill, they killed. There's one pastor I know of. My husband was in the Ministerial Alliance, so we had a lot of the inside information on what went in that town that most people didn't. They set one pastor up. They caused another one to have a nervous breakdown. So no wonder those people in the occult were saying, well, we can't trust God. If they can kill pastors, then they can for sure kill us. And that's why God started showing me the open doors, things that we have in our lives that we don't know are wrong even, that Satan can use against us. And so they would just curse these people to death, and they would just ended up, it was such an accumulation of curses and rituals they were doing against them that they eventually were able to kill people.
I think that when we look to the world as our authority and give our sense of where our values come from the world, and a lot of Christians do, I think we worship the God of other people's opinion. That opens doors, and we don't know they're open, and so we don't understand why these things are happening. And it also puts us in a position exactly where the enemy wants us, which is hopelessness.
It is. And I think that that's such a tool that Satan uses, because I'm sure that in my early years, when I was right in the middle of all of this, I would have been hopeless. What hope would I have had? All I saw was everything. They were controlling it all. The very people that you saw in churches were coming in the rituals that night. So there's very little chance. I mean, I had to really fight some fear that were with the back parts of my mind when this started, because they really didn't have hope. But I finally was able to see that how they were able to get things done to the people in the churches, how they were able to do this is we really hadn't been taught of how to walk in the kingdom of God.
Right.
And we've been taught some lies.
I agree.
And so it moves us out of that kingdom protection. And that's what my goal was, is I thought, God, teach me how to walk in the kingdom. Teach me how to get these doors closed. Anything that I'm doing that's wrong, that I've been taught is okay to you, but it's really not. Just teach me the truth of your word. And what we found is as we continued on that process, and we just would look at what God would present to us, and we'd search the scriptures, and we made changes. And what we found is the more we made those changes, the less they could hurt us. Our health has just been improving steadily through all these years. And the times that we would get hit, this will kind of let you know how back parts do. Maybe this will help your listeners understand us. I had one of the people that had come to our church, and I wasn't really able to make any headway with them for whatever reason. I knew that they were programmed multiple. I knew that they had a practicing witch as one of their personalities. And so what she would do is she would have her little child bring me a cursed item and hand it to me. And one of my personalities that is called Maggie, which I think she just derived her name from Project Magi, and she took Magi and made it Maggie. Well, I think that she was deleted. I think that the salvation of my spirit had come to that part, and I think that she wasn't following what they wanted her to do and maybe the occult training, and I think they deleted that part. But that part got free as I was being healed, and all I could ever feel when that part was co-conscious with me was just unbelievable love, and especially for children. So that part of me would take that item that girl was giving me, and I'd just take whatever came with it, because she believed that if I didn't take it, it would return on that child. Because what they were doing is they were using their children as shields. That if I didn't take it, it would come back and hit the child and not me. And that's so hard to imagine. But I mean, you have to understand that girl was, submitted to torture, and that's probably what she was trained. So I was so sick one day because I'd taken one of these things, and usually when a child would give me something, I just put it on the refrigerator. That's what we always did in our house. And my husband came in and I was sick, and he said, I'm going to pray, because he said something's wrong. So he brought me that picture off of the refrigerator, and he said, honey, who gave you this? And I told him. And he said, honey, you can't keep taking this like this. He said, they're going to end up making you so sick you can't go on. And I said, don't